Okay, well, I really want to thank everybody for being here to our adjusted schedule. Really appreciate the ingenuity that all of you have shown, so thanks so much. For those of you that aren't familiar with Northwest Grassroots, we've been doing these meetings for 111 months now. This is our 190th event, and so we've been doing this normally with not set up problems for a long time, so thank you for being here. This, as you know, is the Spokane Homeless Transition Forum, and we have people here that are quite familiar with Spokane and what we call our homeless situation, and I know there are people in the audience that have information also, so I think it's going to be a great meeting. How we'll handle it is we have some short segments from the video Seattle is Dying that just depict one of the sort of a subject. Then we'll stop it and the panel will add their discussion. We will start again with the next segment. At the end there will be questions and answers from the audience, not during, okay? So keep track of your questions if you have something that you just can't remember. Perfect. So I have asked Danny Green, Pastor Green, to lead us in a short invocation, and we'll follow it with the Pledge of Allegiance. So would you all please stand now? Appreciate it.
So we pray. Heavenly Father, we are just grateful to be here, Lord. We just thank you for this amazing city of Spokane. Each and every one of the people that live here in this city, Lord, we just lift them up and just give them strength, courage, Lord. We just lift just the homeless. We lift up just maybe the addicts. So just lift up everybody that is struggling and having some hard times. And just lift up the people that are productive parts of society. We're just grateful for all that you're doing in our lives. We love you, Lord. We're just grateful for this time that we have right here. We give it all to you, and we just surrender our life to be that Christian that I want to be, that you desire me to be, and we're just blessed to have this time, Lord. And Lord, thank you, Lord, and as we pray, amen.
Amen.
I pledge of allegiance.
Here's our flag on the screen.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Okay. Make sure I have this going the right way. Sometimes I turn this upside down and it really gets messed up. It's not good. So when I first watched the documentary, I thought, number one, it can't be that bad. Number two, I thought, how sad. And, you know, it just doesn't seem that Seattle that I knew back when I would go to Seattle for conferences or Seahawk games had just drastically changed. And unfortunately, for the, not for the better. And, at our meetings and things, we often joke about the city of Spokane infringing on our other communities. We often tell the Spokane Valley City Council they need to build a wall to keep it from coming west and, things that way. But this is definitely not what we want to do. So I did find this video to be extremely disturbing. I knew we had a homeless situation in Spokane, but I didn't really know very much about it. I mean, we live up north. We don't come into the city very often. But then one night, after I'd watched this, on the news, there was a short video segment, and I immediately called Mike Fagan and asked him if a meeting like what we're doing today would be appropriate. Is it an issue that all of us need to be more aware of? And he said yes, so thank you all for being.
Drug use on the streets in Spokane is rampant. On our way to film this story, we saw a man stumbling and first responders helping him. He appeared to be under the influence of drugs. Here at Spokane's downtown library, drug use in bathrooms is not a surprise. On a typical day, we're told a custodian could come across blood in bathroom stalls and needles in toilets, which was causing a lot of damage to the plumbing inside the library.
We're spending up to $800 per week on calling a plumber to address toilet clogs for people inappropriately disposing of needles.
According to data from the Spokane Regional Health District report, in 2014, about 1.7% of adults said they used opioids in the last 30 days.
Take a look at my hands. You can see the veins here in the normal light setting, but the Spokane Public Library has been having a problem, especially in the men's restrooms, with rampant needle use. They've put up signs like this one right up behind me. They've also put in needle disposal boxes, but follow me, take a look what they've just done. They've installed these blue lights, which you can see right here, makes it very hard for me to find where my veins are. And they hope that these lights deter the amount of drug use that's been taking place in these bathrooms.
Since the installation of the blue lights, they have not had to call a plumber once. The blue lights are installed in the men's restrooms on both floors because that's where most of the drug use was taking place. Even with the signs and safe needle disposal boxes,
Didn't find that those were effective, so this has been the step that's really curtailed that behavior.
the goal of the lighting is to make it challenging for drug users to find their veins so that they will quit using the restrooms as a place to inject themselves. In Spokane, I'm Peter Maxwell, KHQ Local News.
So that really did wake me up. I'm going, whoa, this is Spokane. So, Councilman Mike Fagan, what do y'all think of this guy?
Great man.
I think he's a glutton for punishment. 8 years on the council, and now he's announced his candidacy for council president. But wouldn't it be nice if the council could be more representatives of the citizens in the area? Anyway, we have Mike to thank for this evening's program, and I really appreciate his help. And since most of you have watched Seattle is Dying, we're not going to sit through it again because we want to focus on Spokane. So again, like I said earlier, what we'll do is show short segments of the video that will guide our conversation. We'll move on, get the panel's perspective, then we'll show another segment, and questions and answers will be at the end. So Mike, would you please introduce the panel?
Oh, you betcha. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much for taking the time to be here today on such short notice. Do want to apologize because we did have to, at the last minute, cancel the last scheduled meeting that we had earlier this week by virtue of someone who displays some issues with mental health. More specifically, threats were levied towards the management of that facility, and as a result, the management felt that it was a good idea to stand down on the meeting. After a short period of thinking about it, I was recontacted by John and Cecily, dear friends, and we decided to go ahead and let's give it one more shot, see if we can't put something together. That way we can get it documented and out there for others to see. We just got done as the City of Spokane releasing our homeless point-in-time count. Our numbers did go up. There were two categories where our numbers came down, and that would be with regard to what the City of Spokane is doing with regard to family homelessness as well as veteran homelessness. Our individual homelessness numbers, and I'm sure that the homelessness numbers that we could see from our educational sector, which is, and again, our homeless population is comprised of 4 different segments. You've got our individuals, you've got our juveniles, you've got our families, you've got our veterans. I can tell you, since I've been in office, at our city council meetings, during the normal course of business, we don't hear from those folks that are getting services that are in the family or the veteran category. And taking a look at the programs and the amount of social service support that exists for those two components of this circle, if you will, seems as though we're doing a good job. Granted, I'd like to see our assessments on success re-evaluated so that we are not just counting heads that walk into the doors to seek services. I'd like to see accountability that will actually track people from the time they walk in that door, where it is that we are sending them to correct their condition, to improve their condition. And I know, as well as everybody out here, that you can lead a horse to water, okay? And that seems to be part of our battle too. But I wanted to let you know that the point in time count is currently out. The city is now evaluating the potential for 5-year social service contracts as opposed to annual contracts with the potential for extension. There's some positives and negatives to extended contracts like this. And I'm hoping that those that did bid and responded on those RFPs took into consideration what is happening at the state and the national levels, so that we are being given some real good information to base our decisions on at the end of the day. I mean, are we taking into consideration economic fluctuations, state mandated minimum wage, family leaves, things like this, as far as annual cost increases in our contracts? That would be something I'd be concerned about. And again, we need to reevaluate what it is that we're doing, okay? Now, right before this meeting, I had occasion on Messenger to shoot John a video that was provided to me earlier this morning by Mark Richard, president of the Downtown Spokane Partnership. This video depicted a guy downtown, broad daylight, right on the sidewalk. He's standing, watching people walk back and forth. And he's shooting up, right there, on camera. John kind of gave me the look that he didn't get the Messenger video yet, but he will eventually. And you want to talk about shocking? I mean, this is right in front of your face. At least a dozen people walk by this guy, and he's just sitting there, right in front of them, shooting up. There's a component of our homeless that is very active, very vocal. And it is that component of the homeless population that we have here in the city of Spokane that has been to the city council meetings. Those are the guys that comprise the tent city,
Okay.
etc. Yeah, John, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know, it's very, very easy to just go and go and go. The other thing I wanted to let you know also.
She has the book.
Yeah, no kidding. Mayor Condon is currently putting together for the downtown businesses a 5-point plan to deal with the homeless issue. From my meeting with Mr. Richards this morning and some of the 5 points that are coming out in here, it looks as though the administration may very well be pushing off more onus on our business and building owners downtown to deal with this problem. Okay? In my mind, municipal government is responsible for the public safety. Okay? We can work in conjunction and in cooperation with others, but we are responsible. That's what you guys pay us to do. Okay? The citizens here in town have made huge investments in downtown. Huge. Riverfront Park, 64 mil. Okay? By the time it's all said and done, we're talking 70 mil. We've got to do something about this. I understand that where this hotel sits right now, this used to be part of Skid Row back in the day. Okay? I don't want Spokane to become or have downtown a Skid Row. We're on an upward trajectory. We have been for a while, and I know what goes up must come down, but we definitely have to do something different. There's no doubt about it. Compassion being the highest virtue, it's not working, folks. Okay? I mean, I'm compassionate just like everybody else. But as you saw the quote in the paper from me, it would be a lot more palatable to me. I would feel a lot better about giving up those tax dollars, my blood, sweat, and tears, if I was assured of at least getting an acknowledgement that that individual is going to try.
Thank you. I always have a problem when Mike comes and I don't give him time limits, because.
I mean,
But
this is huge. It's
Right, it is.
really complicated.
There's going to be a lot of time within this that you'll be able to bring up some of these points, so I am going to move on. Now, this slide probably isn't needed as much as it was for the large meeting, but we're just asking that when you do have a question, that you don't editorialize and bloviate and go on and on like members of Congress do, that type of thing, that you ask a direct, relevant question. So,
Or city council members.
yes, I was going to say that, and then I thought I'd already spanked you hard enough. So the first segment that we're showing describes the situation as depicted in the documentary and the frustration that the citizens are feeling there.
Let me ask you something. What if Seattle is dying and we don't even know it? This story is about a seething, simmering anger that is now boiling over into outrage. It is about people who have felt compassion, yes, but who no longer feel safe, no longer feel like they are heard, no longer feel protected. It is about lost souls who wander our streets, untethered to home or family or reality, chasing a drug which in turn chases them. It is about the damage they inflict on themselves, to be sure, but also on the fabric of this place where we live. This story is about a beautiful jewel that has been violated, and a crisis of faith amongst a generation of Seattleites falling out of love with their home. There is another part of this story, too. It's about a solution, an idea for a city that has run out of them. And I ask again, what if Seattle is dying and we don't even know it?
I drive my 12-year-old's carpool through Yesler when we do carpool, and it's a good talking point about, what they're seeing, what we can do to help, how we can make a difference. And honestly, at this point, I don't have a good answer for how we can make a difference. The last 5 to 10 years, it's not the place that I grew up in, and it's been really sad.
Matt Campbell lives and works in Seattle. He's raising a family, and like many others, he's mad.
It's gotten to a point where I'm embarrassed of it. I don't want to have my friends and family come here anymore.
People didn't used to use the word embarrassing about Seattle, but if you listen closely, you'll hear it a lot now.
It's embarrassing. This is one of the most beautiful regions in the entire world, and right now, with lack of a better word, it looks like shit, and it's embarrassing.
This is Mehrdad Derek Shande. He runs an upholstery shop in Ballard near the Burke-Gilman Trail. See if you can't feel his frustration.
This is just a bunch of. This is not right.
Out his window, he looks at this.
Oh, they're human beings. Yes, I'm a human being too.
Customers coming to his shop see the same thing.
I have known cops from Compton, Watts, South Central. They have some power in their hands. Here you see a bunch of twinkle toes running around here. What the heck? Because they run the city like that. They're having problems. They're not having enough authority.
There were fires set outside his shop this past summer, and Mr. Derek Shande does not blame police. He believes their power has been stripped away.
The city mayor doesn't give the cops authority. That's the problem. We need somebody with some weights and tell them, it's not legal living on the sidewalk. It's city ordinance. It's not legal living here. Why can't we enforce the law?
No Robert's rule. We're going to have a community discussion.
Last May 2nd at a town hall meeting in Ballard, simmering anger boiled over into all-out rage.
So why do we see so many people living outdoors?
Will you manage these camps and will you enforce the law?
there has evolved a profound disconnect, and rarely has it been more vividly laid out than in this exchange.
If property crime is committed, violence is committed, you need to call 911 and the police.
You've lost all credibility when you say, you said 2 words. You said call 911. Do you understand that the police have told us to vote you all out so that they can do their jobs? And you're telling us to call 911? You're smiling. You think it's funny? You think it's funny the way we're living?
The way we're living in beautiful Seattle, people are angry, furious about the way we are living.
Okay, so it's the panel's turn now to talk about, are any of the things that Seattle's experiencing, are we experiencing them here? Have you had city council meetings with frustrated citizens? That kind of thing. So stick to the segment, that just what you know and that kind of thing. Whoever wants to start.
Danny, Steve, Christine, please jump on in. Go ahead.
Well, we see it a lot in our, we're on Grace and Maple, we have a church. Ours is a recovery church. For those who don't know, we have a lot of recovering heroin addicts, recovering meth addicts, recovering alcoholics. I believe that's one of probably the biggest problems of homelessness is drug addiction. I believe, I could be wrong, but I just know that my heart and passion is I love Spokane. I don't want to see it go like that to Seattle. I love Spokane. I want to be able to help clean up the streets of Spokane one addict at a time. That's my heart and passion. And so we get the homeless people in our church, and it really is hard. They're in the front doors. They've got their bag, their sleeping bags. We have toys for kids where they're urinating and feces is everywhere and needles are everywhere. It's not right. We do have to do something. My heart, my passion. I love them. I just don't. We got to do something though. We have to do something here in Spokane to we can get housing for them, but I don't know what the whole problem, what we could do, but I do know that we need to do something. The Union Gospel Mission is a great place for a lot of people to go, but a lot of them don't go. I deal with a lot of homeless that they don't want to change. They don't want to change. That's the way they want to live. And there's some I'm sure that want to change. I'm not putting the whole blanket over all of them. I just know that there's a lot of the homeless that don't want to change. They want to continue to run through the red light. They don't want to do what the rules. They don't want to live by the rules. They want to have freedom to do whatever they want to do. Continue to run through the red lights. Continue to run through the red lights. And when you continue to run through the red lights, you're going to crash and get hurt. And so to me, it's about they can't just do whatever they want. I have to live by rules. I have to live by rules. We all have to live by rules, and we have Christian recovery houses that we run. That this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you're supposed to live. You get up. For us Christians, Bible study. Clean your room, make your bed. And you're just not. There's someone out there that just don't want to follow by the rules. What do? How do we do it? I don't know how. I don't know. Mike Fagan is his heart and passion is the city of Spokane, just like I believe all of us right here. All of us right here is to help Spokane be what it's supposed to be. And it's a beautiful city, and we need to not just close our eyes. We can't just make it's not happening. It is happening, and there's a lot of anger. A lot of people that come around our church are angry, and we have to call the police. And they say there's nothing they can do. Especially when there was an ordinance where they could sleep in your doorway and you couldn't have them leave. And that was changed, I heard, so we were able to let them, you can't sleep here. People are trying to walk into church over you, and we can't have that. So my heart and passion, I believe that addiction is probably the main problem in homelessness, and my heart and passion is to help them. We need to help them some way, either Family Faith Community Church, Union Gospel Mission. There's lots of them that can help, but they have to be willing to help or want help. They got to be willing to want to help. If they don't, then we got to figure out something to do, and that's my say on.
Hey, it just dawned on me. I asked Mike to introduce the panel, and then he got off on doing other stuff.
I sure did, yeah.
This is Danny Green.
This is Danny Green, and Mike, would you like to follow the script?
Yes, sitting right next to me is an acquaintance of mine that I have developed and whatnot over. How long have we known each other? About 3 years now?
I think so.
Okay. And I've known Christine to have been affected by a real nasty political type real estate deal as a result of the North-South corridor. Left her homeless. She found her way to Father Bach House, and she's been in Father Bach House for the last at least 2 years, probably going on 3 now.
No, it's 6 years.
Oh, 6 years, on my word. Okay. And, I have been encouraging Christine over the years to come to the city council and let us know what's on her heart, what's on her mind. And boy, I tell you, she's definitely done that. And then sitting right next to Christine, obviously, Pastor Danny Green. Family of faith. I like to refer to that church as gravitating towards grace. They just so happen to be on West Grace Avenue. Wonderful folks. And I'll tell you, if you ever get a chance to go on over there and meet with the congregation, please do that. Those folks are, they are really trying, really, really trying. And then, of course, on the end, former Spokane City Council member and current president of the Spokane Landlord Association, Mr. Steve Corker. And I had originally picked these panel members so that they could give you a little bit of an idea of what their world is like. Unfortunately, Phil Allmark couldn't be here because of the short notice, nor could Mr. Mark Richard by virtue of the short notice. But I just so happened to have a meeting with Mark at 10 o'clock today, and he unloaded some additional thoughts on me. So.
Great. So back on the Spokane is what we saw, a tall, the same as we have in Seattle and Spokane, and are the citizens frustrated?
I think my role is to try to help define the role of the private sector. There are many people who feel it's not government's responsibility, that the private sector or the nonprofit sector should assume that responsibility, and I'd like to share with you some of the concerns that we have. I think, first of all, it's understanding the cause. It's mental illness, it's psychological independence, it's the byproduct of combat. A lot of conditions put people into the homeless category. One of the problems is the public sector, both the city and the state, have kind of lumped homelessness into one category. They haven't separated the issues of the working poor versus the homeless. And in case of working poor, they haven't separated what I call one-time circumstances. The fact is that 60% of the people in the city of Spokane do not have the financial income, using 30% of their net income to either rent a house or buy one. We do not have capital-intensive businesses. Our tax base is about 60% of the normal average. Our general fund is $200 million. If we were any other city in the country, it would be close to $300 million. And those factors, and the fact that we don't have capital-intensive businesses that generate income, have created a level of poverty that makes the city of Spokane largely the third legislative district, one of the poorest in the state. And when I was on the city council in 2001, the federal government came and said, not only are red states going to send to blue states, but counties and cities are going to be, in eastern Washington, are going to be sending the most challenged people to metropolitan areas. And that means you, city of Spokane. They're going to close down hospitals, they're going to close down social service agencies, and they're going to tell them to come to metropolitan areas. And we have what I call a donut in this region. We have a progressive donut hole, and we have a conservative dough around us. And we have not developed what I call regional policies. And too many people are saying, you know, that's the city's problem. I just heard on the news the president wants to send them to sanctuary cities. The red states wants to send them to blue. Well, we're sanctuary, we're blue, and the people are coming. If you go down to City Gate, the number of people that have been given one-way tickets to go to Seattle or Spokane, and that is a dilemma. And the problem the private sector has is that when they do legislation, and I spent days in Olympia, they don't separate the issue. They have one bill that they pass that they think will fit all. And the Republicans are saying it's not government's responsibility. The Democrats are saying all of it is government responsibility. In the meantime, they're looking at the private sector to deal with the homeless problem. And the city passed Title 18, a voucher, which mandates that private landlords have to consider vouchers as income. They do not understand that for most people that are in a homeless condition, particularly those that are mentally ill, the ability for them to turn their lives around, when out of the 17 vouchers that are eligible entities in this county, 15 of them are only for 30 or 60 days. The only voucher system which is long-term is Section 8. And that can go on a person's eligible. In our case, we had 2 properties. One involved Catholic Charities. The people came in. The woman was supposed to go through training to have her mother be taken care of by her, and she would receive money from the state. Within 30 days of moving in, she invited 8 or 9 of her homeless friends in. It was winter, doing what she thought was compassion. She never went and completed her training. And after 6 months, we had to evict them. We inherited a $3,000 heat bill because we couldn't turn the heat out all down. And we had almost $5,000 of trash to clear out of the yard. And to expect the private sector landlords to assume the social responsibility, there's only one agency out of the 17 that really provides assistance to homeless victims. And that's Goodwill. They work with the veterans. If they don't get up in the morning, they get them up. If they don't clean the yard, they make them clean it up. Catholic Charities, and they admit it, they don't have the resources. And their concern is put a roof over the head, and expect the private sector to assume that type of responsibility is not realistic. So what's happening? Did you see how many evictions have been in the paper recently? They're so afraid of the legislation that's coming down that's going to mandate that landlords may have the responsibility of giving up 90 days after the eviction process starts for these people to turn their lives around. For most of my 800 landlords, not being able to meet their financial obligations or mortgage in a 4-month period puts them out of business. And what scares me is when I talk to my Democratic friends in Olympia and say, you're driving the private sector out of being a responsible participant in this homeless issue, they said, well, that's fine, because I want government to assume it all. I said, you've got an administration in Washington that doesn't want to do it, and you don't have a tax base in this city to do it. And what you're proposing will not solve the problem. They're not really understanding the economic realities. We need to define what the role of the private sector is. And if we are, we should be given tax incentives. We should be given conditions that allow us to absorb bad cases. The county had a program which was highly successful where they would buffer landlords who took the risk and help them, either transitioning people out or assuming some of the financial responsibility for what happens. I firmly believe that in about 80% of the cases, if you move homeless individuals into housing environments, it has to be assisted living or housing that's supervised. You cannot expect the private landlord to do that. And that's the biggest problem with the voucher system. And the state is only increasing that. So my plea is to allow us to sit down and develop the policies that help define the role of the private sector. We need to be a part of it. I believe in free enterprise, and I think it's like medicine. Having the private sector in housing and being a part of the solution is what our country is all about. And one of my primary roles of doing things like today is to not forget the compassion that has to be a part of the solution. We're dealing with human beings. Anybody in this room has had a time in their life when things didn't go well. But the issue of responsibility, what's a Christian thing? Teach them how to fish, don't keep feeding them. And right now we're attacking the symptoms, not the cause.
Yes.
And if our elected officials ignore that reality, we'll be another Seattle. Yeah. And we'll have discussions like this with your grandchildren sitting in the room.
Christine, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I lived homeless.
You need to keep it close to your mouth.
Okay. Thank you. My name's Christine Schuler. I was made homeless by the North-South Freeway. Basically, I feel it was political in that they're spending money that they don't have, and when they get to near the end of the math problem, they realize, oh, we don't have enough money, somebody's going to have to be cheated, so they pick the lowest income people. You know, I've been disabled my entire life. I could have been on Social Security disability, but I didn't. I was working from home to support myself, and so I kind of feel that this homeless problem is more political than people seem to think. There's many reasons why somebody comes homeless. A lot of them are veterans that coming back from military and they have post-traumatic stress and nobody wants to hire them, and there's a lot of people that are on the drugs. There's just way too many reasons somebody is homeless to solve it with one problem. But if you were going to try and find one issue or one category to title it of why people is political, I think it's socialism versus capitalism. And I think that our city was targeted because we have been, you know, not a blue city. We've been voting red where the rest of the country's turning blue. And I think our city was actually targeted to focus to become, you know, having people vote liberal. I think it's very much political. And that if you're gonna, it's basic education. I think a lot of children are going through the public school system and being trained to vote liberal. They're being trained that if they sit in these chairs for 18 years and just there'll be a job waiting for you when you get out of public school and you take your student loans and go to college, there'll be some magical job waiting for you, and there just isn't. And that's not how it works. And some people turn to drugs because they don't have hope. They come out of the public school thinking that, where's this job? They didn't get it. Why didn't I get everything that was promised me? And so some turn to drugs, some turn to drinking, some turn to crime. There's a lot of reasons why they end up homeless, but I think education is where it needs to, like basic education, where they need to be taught that they need to stand up for themselves. Like you said, you can't just feed people, you have to teach them how to fish. You can't just promise them some magical job if they sit in this chair or vote liberal. You have to give, the rules have to be such a way that people have the opportunity to create their own job. And every time they raise minimum wage, it's putting people out of business. And now people are thinking that, like, minimum wage laws are really bad because personally, you know, I'm disabled, but I think that I should have the right to work for less than minimum wage if I want to. But business owners are bound to not hire somebody for less than minimum wage because the laws say they can't. They're going to be punished. And personally, I would like to work for less than minimum wage. And the whole system, turning it into socialism with the affordable housing where people get into that this is what I'm in. I had to live in my car for 2 years because when the North-South Freeway took my neighborhood, it took the whole entire neighborhood gone, and there was nowhere to live. There was nowhere for a poor person to live, except for in some of these downtown buildings where you share a bathroom with 10 sex offenders. I wasn't going to do that. I lived in my car for 2 years until the first affordable housing was built, Fatherbuck Haven, and moved in there. That was 6 years ago, and so I have learned a lot. Before that, I used to work for myself out of my home. That I was a long-term renter, and if they hadn't torn down the neighborhood, I'd still be there. I'd still be working for myself. I would never have gotten onto Social Security, which I could have been, but I was like, I didn't want to be labeled as by my disabilities.
Well, thank
so
you.
I think that's what it's about, is education and political. They need to focus on that. Like he said, that they're fighting the cause or symptoms, like the drug use. People are running out of hope, and so they're turning to drugs and things, or crime, where they need to be given back the hope of being able to fish for themselves and stop being so compassionate that we just give them things.
Thank you.
Instead of changing the rules to make them be able to do it.
Here you.
I could talk
I know. That's why I said thank you. Thank you. Mike, do you have a minute that you'd like to add anything?
Well, I'll tell you, again, folks, this is really, really complicated because there are a whole lot of variables involved. Just know it's going to start with a culture change and a culture shift. Now, way back when, there was discussions by JFK and Ronald Reagan about deinstitutionalization. Okay? That's when we started defunding mental health services and things like this. And then it was after Reagan, if I recall, that we started seeing issues with Western and Eastern state. Okay? It's going to take a culture change. And there's a whole lot of different things that we've got to look at. We got to look at how we evaluate success. We have to admit, first and foremost, we got a problem. And it's multiple problems.
Right.
The drugs. Shut down the border. Okay? Big Pharma is only 50% of it, and I'm being conservative and kind. But you got to shut down the border.
Okay.
Anyway,
our next segment
yeah, go ahead.
is going to give you an idea of the burden. Not only the financial burden, but the burden shouldered by law enforcement and the courts.
Yeah.
The Puget Sound Business Journal estimates that Seattle and its outlying areas spend $1 billion addressing and responding to the homeless situation every year. And they say that number is almost certainly underestimated. Nonprofits, city and county budgets, police calls to homeless camps, hospital services, building tiny houses, drug treatment and outreach. Picking up needles, clearing out camps, garbage details, chain link fencing, and the more money we throw at the problem, the worse it gets. But of course, what is happening in King County and on the streets of Seattle isn't about dollars, it's about human lives. How can this be the right thing to do? How can watching human beings live and die in filth and degradation and madness be right? The cost isn't $1 billion a year. The cost is quality of life. The cost is people not wanting to take their families downtown anymore. Families not feeling safe in their own neighborhoods. The cost is people no longer feeling like they are heard, no longer feeling protected. The cost is people dying in the streets and the rest of us getting used to seeing it, numb to the suffering. The cost is incalculable. How did we get to this point? This is a list of familiar faces, repeat offenders, people who break the laws, get caught, get released, and break the laws again and again and again. There are 100 names on the list. Scott Lindsay is the man who dived into public records and researched the list.
If we take somebody into the jail, don't give them meaningful help, and then put them right back out on the streets, we know they're going to commit the same crimes in the same places, and our public records, our criminal justice records, really show that that's exactly what's happening.
Look at the sheer volume of criminal cases. Calvin A., 68 criminal cases since 2002, repeated random assaults on random individuals. Drainen B., 54 criminal cases since 2016. Michelle C., 72 cases since 2000. And the list goes on and on. Seattle's mayor says this.
It is wrong to conflate homelessness with a rise in crime.
For at least 100 people, it would at the very least appear to be a factor.
Of the 100 that you looked at, what percentage of them were homeless?
Yeah, from our criminal justice records, 100% had indicators that they were currently homeless.
And what percent showed signs of addiction?
Yeah, 100% also showed signs of a substance use disorder.
And what percent were mentally ill?
Yeah, a little less than half had been evaluated by the courts formally for mental health conditions, serious, severe mental health conditions.
On average, the people on the list had 36 criminal cases each in the state of Washington and 7 jail bookings in the last year.
What this report also shows is that the police are working hard. They're making contacts, they're making arrests for criminal behaviors of, again, the same people in the same places over and over and over. What I think we need to focus on is what is our criminal justice system doing to support those police officers.
The 100 names had between them more than 3,600 criminal cases. For the most part, few have done serious time. They are out in our communities, walking our streets. The drain on the system, the drain on resources and manpower is incalculable.
The fact that this system could go on with, in effect, 100% failure rate for so long without anybody raising questions, without city council hosting hearings, without any action being taken, is something that it's hard for me to explain.
Do our law enforcement officers, are their hands tied? Are they feeling as if, why bother when people are just processed and put back out in the street? What's happening there as far as all that goes?
Well, I know Sheriff Ozzie personally, and I know his frustration with all that goes on. When you put them in jail, they set them out, put them in jail, they send them back out, and we got to quit putting a microscope over, the police department and let the police department do their job. I believe that almost all the police department, the men, police women are there to help protect our city, but when they keep getting thrown through the fire of doing this or doing that, or let our police department be do their job and help this city of Spokane, and quit putting them under a microscope every time they do something wrong. It's and I'm not saying all of them are perfect. None of us are perfect. I'm not perfect, but I believe as I see and talk to Sheriff Ozzie and see sometimes. There's just a strain on his face, what he has to put up with through not the criminals, but through the city and through the county, and what he has to put up with all the people coming at him and badgering the police. Let the police do their job. They're there for a reason, to help us and keep us safe. But if we keep putting up barriers for them, then to me, I love the police department.
So on the cost,
and Sheriff Department. Yeah,
on the cost basis, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I heard that $22 million annually is being spent in Spokane County on the homeless situation. 19 million of that is put up by the city. That's a lot of money.
We as taxpayers have to determine what responsibility the public sector is going to have in dealing with this problem. People say, well, the city isn't spending enough money. 75% of the general fund goes to public safety. 75% of the general fund of the city of Spokane goes to police, fire, court systems, jails, things of this nature. We closed the mental facility in eastern Washington out of Medical Lake, dumping hundreds of people on the streets that were not capable of really integrating in society and assuming their responsibility. And we continue to have people saying it's not government's responsibility. And the fact is, to prevent things like this, it's not whether government's involved. It's how they spend that money. Somebody told me that Seattle was spending something like $100,000 or $120,000 per individual homeless person.
Yep. Yep.
Do you know how much that could go for rehabilitation?
Yeah.
How much that could mean to a support program for the private sector, to money to supervise and housing environments that would help people change their lives? when you look at Section 8 housing, the majority of people who go on Section 8 housing, once they get off, they don't go back. Because it takes time for them to get their lives back together. And you know, I'm probably the only Democrat in this room. And you would wonder why a Democrat would be elected head of the Home Landlord Association. It's because it's going to take all of us.
Amen.
And somehow compromise, sitting down and trying to come up with realistic solutions that go after the cause as well as taking care of the needs. We're spending the money in the wrong ways, in the wrong directions. They say, well, can't build a new jail. You know, folks, for about 30 years, we're going to have to incarcerate about a third of the people that are in the homeless environment. What happens in that environment will change their lives. About a third people need to go into places like Eastern Washington. It's losing the battle to win the war. It's an investment in changing lives. That's only part of it. The other is how families raise their children. What happened to the work ethic? You know, I could go to work at 11 back in the 40s and 50s. The only reason my son had a job is because we had a business. And we're not creating the type of environment. I read the book about the Greatest Generation, and one of the reasons these 18 and 19-year-old men and women went off and did the unbelievable was because of the Depression. It hardened them. It matured them. They were doing things as teenagers that our kids don't even look at until they get out of college. And here we are yelling liberal, conservative, and yay and nay, and we're not talking to each other. I work more with Mike Fagan than any other city councilman because he cares about the people. You talk to anybody at City Hall. He's out there working with the people more than anybody else. He cares about the individuals. He doesn't ask whether they're R or D. He says, how can I help you? The city of Spokane is listening a lot better than the state legislature is doing. I can tell you that. The city listened. We had town hall forums. They started off with a couple things that got kind of crazy, but they've tabled things because they realized it wasn't that simple. And that's one of the most progressive groups in the area. The legislature is not doing that. You go for public testimony, they closed out most of the public testimony. When they did, you had 30 seconds. They were a train that already left the station. And when I asked them, what is this all about? And he said, it's payback time for what Washington did to us for the last 2 years. Folks, that's the type of rhetoric that's going to destroy this country. And instead of people sitting down and talking, the Skip O'Neills and the Reagans used to drink beer and have peanut butter sandwiches and talk about and come up with issues that solve the problem. And that's not happening. And what happened in Washington is scrawled down to Olympia and is crawled down to our city. But we changed it in the city by participation. We got over 500 landlords to go, and the city listened. And we tried to do a thing in Olympia, and they didn't listen. And the worst thing that happened in Olympia is having the D's get control of both houses. Because before then, they had to work together. And I'm afraid of either side having total control. Because one says everything's done by the private sector, the other side, everything's done by government. That's not the way America works. Government was the last resort. We used to build barns when they burned down, we'd go back farming. Then all of a sudden somebody has to create a fire department. And we haven't been the same since.
Anyone else on this part?
Well, this is about the police, right?
Well, it's about the amount of money that's being spent. So I would say that private sector would probably be more supportive if they could see positive results for supporting. And so we're spending a tremendous amount of money, but is that doing any good? So it's about money, and it's about the repeat offenders. And
offenders.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if people are committing crimes, they should go to jail. And if there isn't enough jail room, then there needs to be more. If there's an ongoing problem, I like not studied that subject, but if If there's an ongoing problem of not enough jail space, then we do need more jail space.
But I
at the
feel
same
that just
time-
a normal jail space that we have here is not going to help those people one bit. They need intervention, they need help.
If they've committed crimes, they should go to jail. And if they're on drugs and that's a reason why they're committing crimes, then maybe they'll be in there long enough to break their addiction. But you can't force somebody to not want to do drugs if that's what they're going to do.
That's correct.
And so, you know, there should be the money spent on that. But at the same time, police officers shouldn't be harassing people just because they're poor or just because how they look. If they have not committed a crime, then they should be left alone.
Do you feel the police harass?
I have seen that and have experienced that, yes, because I live in the downtown area, and so I get labeled as part of what people are complaining about is going on in the downtown area and the homeless people. And if I'm just in my own neighborhood riding my bicycle, yes, I have been harassed wrongly. And to be fair, I've also received a letter from the police chief apologizing for being mistreated. So if a person's committing a crime, they should be arrested and dealt with. But if they're not committing a crime, then they shouldn't be harassed based on what they look like or their income level.
I think we all agree with that. Mike, did you have anything? Oh,
I
Danny.
do, just for one. I just know that there was a time when I heard they were trying to hire sheriffs and they were trying to hire police, and nobody was wanting to get hired. To me, that gets a red flag. That's scary. When our police department, nobody wants to be a police officer, nobody wants to be a sheriff, nobody wants to be in the law enforcement. We've got a problem. If we don't have police, we're in trouble. And I know some police might do some things, but I believe with all my heart that 95%, even 98%, are good people trying to make this a good city. And so we got to encourage people and the young people to want to be police officers and sheriffs. Instead of beating up on the police department, we need to lift them up and thank them for doing what they're doing.
It has to do with training. It has to do with training. We have a fire department where 80% or almost 90% of the calls are medical. And they're still driving fire trucks that get 8 miles a gallon. And their whole orientation is 80% of structural fires. We have a police department that's undermanned. And the training has not kept up with the times. They're dealing with the psychological issues. They're dealing with, for lack of better term, tolerance. The training needs to be updated. The training needs to be longer. There'd be less turnover. It's again losing the battle to win the war. And why are these things happening? Public accountability to office holders. And to me, the biggest problem is that for 97% of elected officials in the United States of America, that's their primary source of income. It's their job. Mm-hmm. And they do the things to protect that job and the security of their families. One of the reasons I could go after the Coles and not be afraid about losing the office in River Park Square was because public office was not my job. When I lost the election after that controversy, people said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go back and teach at Gonzaga and make 3 times as much and work 1/3 of the time." If George Washington were alive today and saw that people spent 40 years of their life in public service, it should be like United Way. You step out of your career. And the inflexibility of elected officials to be held accountable. 70% or 80% of the people elected to Congress were really not contested. Tell me, Republican or Democrat, are you proud of what's happened in the last 20 years in Congress? Because we both had our chance.
Yep.
And so we're afraid of new blood. The one nice thing about local government is you don't make enough money to make it a career. I don't think I was ever bribed. I don't think I was ever even propositioned. That was a nice thing. But the most important thing was, it was 24/7 with my constituency. If I'm in Olympia, 99% of my constituency never sees me.
That's right.
Same with Washington, D.C. About the time I started getting on my high horse, a lady in Rosar's would come up and say, "You're a son of a bitch." And bring me down to earth. That sense of accountability we've lost in American politics. And it's so important to have the majority continue, Republican or Democrat, that will excuse that lack of accountability. I mean, if you look at the track record that we've had for the last 20 years, I think every one of them should have been thrown out of office, because I think a whole new generation of people have done a better job. And at the local level, that's even more important, that we hold them accountable. I tried to get the fire department to incorporate more medics and transition. In fact, take over the ambulance service. That would help low-income families deal with the costs that are associated oftentimes with that service. And the unions didn't want it. The private company didn't want it. I was getting it from the right and the left. And we're operating a fire department that's based on 1940 operating procedures. We're operating a police department. You say, well, we can't build more jails. Incorporation doesn't have to be a jail that costs $125,000 a room. Incorporation for about a third of the people in jail could be in a medical lake type of facility, getting drug treatment. Not putting them back on the street, and that's a third of the cost. But we don't even have the time when they go through the criminal process to sort them out, because one size fits all. The homeless, the working poor, the mentally ill, the war veterans, lump them all in. That's not how we're going to solve the problem.
Exactly.
Should we appreciate that? Should we let Mike say a couple words?
Just real quick, Mike.
You heard that, guys.
Guys, I know, because I talk to police officers every day, these guys are demoralized. Okay?
And that's our next segment, is on law enforcement.
You bet. They're frustrated. Revolving door at the jail. Whatever it is that we do down the road, it's got to be a hybrid between traditional criminal justice and some of the smart justice stuff that is coming out. I don't agree with it all, but I have seen some of that stuff work. So slowly but surely, I'm coming on board and I'm becoming a believer. Believe it or not, guys, our police contract expired in 2016. We don't have a contract for police skill right now in place. So that in itself has gotten to further demoralize our rank and file police officers at this point. It's all politics here.
Yep.
All right, I'm done.
Okay, our next segment is, it points out the frustration of law enforcement, the burnout they're experiencing, and the pointlessness in what they're being asked to do.
There was a police officer named Todd Wiebke. He prided himself on getting his boots dirty, on meeting the people on the fringes, in the camps. He tried to find common ground as human beings, and he tried to police. He wrote a blog for a long time, first-person musings about patrolling what happens in the dark shadows of West Seattle. Not long ago, he wrote this. This week I dealt with crisis, with narcotics, with heartache, and with liars. Sometimes all at once, sometimes one at a time. I am helpless to unlock the doors when dealing with a person trapped in a horror inside of their own mind. Lord, I try, but I am a limited man with just a little skill. I still love coming to work. We have an awesome city with the ability to adapt and overcome. The only way to lose is to not try. We are trying to solve this crisis, and we will not lose. And then one day this past October, Todd Wiebke was told by one superior to impound an RV and clean up the spot. And when he did it, another superior scolded him for doing so because of new protocol. He had a bellyful, and he walked into HR, and he quit. Retired, just like that.
I feel like I abandoned the ship, that I walked away, and I did, because I couldn't do it anymore. It was just, the bureaucracy built up to the point where I felt like I was no longer necessary as a police officer, that the system had a different idea of how they wanted to handle it, and I was an appendix. I needed to be gone, so I'm gone.
Ask anyone. They'll tell you this was a good cop, the kind we want out there, the kind we need.
But I will tell you that there is no morale. There's a love for the job.
He says the drugs, the camps, the theft, the rot, and the disgrace of it all don't have to destroy Seattle. They're being allowed to.
Everybody's trying to do the right thing. It's just coming out wrong.
Listen to these next words carefully. Let them sink in.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that the only thing I can equate it to is we're running a concentration camp without barbed wire, up to and including the medical experiment of poisoning these people with drugs. I don't know how else to put it, and it's infuriating. Every camp I walked into, there was a weapon, multiple weapons. I found modified weapons. I was constantly on the side of the road talking to people that were swinging machetes, holding an axe, armed with knives. Our city has even gone so far as to say, well, this much of narcotics on your person's okay.
3 grams.
Yeah, hey, that's okay. So that's user quantity. So, when you start, that process and people feel secure and okay having their drugs on them, what's to stop them from doing it? How do you, now you're pretty much okaying narcotics, and the same officers that used to go out there and arrest them are now rendered impotent and can't do anything about it. And it's just a matter of political will on the part of our city to go out there and say, hey, you can't park your motorhome in this driveway with no engine in it, with all this filth around it. You can't do it. It's wrong. And stop them.
Let me ask you this. Knowing what you know, having seen what you've seen, if you had a young family, would you raise them in Seattle right now?
Absolutely not. No. No.
So that is, one retired police officer's experience. Are we experiencing things like this in Spokane with our police force?
Absolutely. We are.
Yep.
Okay, they seem to agree. They say we are. Shall we go on to the next segment? And then we'll, after that next segment, we'll have panel discussion on that. Then we're open for questions and answers. So we'll do that. So the next part is one state's approach to finding a meaningful way to stop the never-ending circle of despair that these folks are experiencing. It's you think about it, it's just, most of us can't even imagine being in that situation and not having anything to look forward to.
The real homeless you don't see. Out-of-work truckers or construction workers who've run into bad luck don't live like this, in tents on mud patches. This is something different. This is drugs, heroin, meth. Citizens know it.
Can we at least acknowledge the elephant in the room, that this is also a drug problem? I've only heard it being mentioned as a housing problem. This is a drug problem?
The quote-unquote homeless know it too.
I have not met anyone else on the street who's not in some phase of addiction. Of use, of serious use. And I think that that's the starting point. You just have to address that. You have to figure that out.
So I want to make sure I got that correct.
I would say 100% of the people that I have met out here are in some level of addiction.
100%.
Yeah.
Every single person.
Every single person I've met out here.
But listen closely. We constantly refer to it as a homeless crisis, not a drug crisis.
The fractured, siloed approach of homelessness in our region.
To help combat the homelessness epidemic.
And the homelessness crisis.
We have a crisis around housing and homelessness.
If we won't even name the thing that is destroying Seattle, what hope do we have of fixing it?
I've wanted this program basically since the day I started.
Dr. Jennifer Clark is the head of what is referred to back east as the MAT program, Medication-Assisted Treatment.
We can't just ignore our way out of this. We can't arrest our way out of this. People are dying, and there's something we can do to stop that.
It starts out here, really, because the first thing that they do in Rhode Island is enforce their laws. Drug dealers and the people who steal and commit crime to get their drugs eventually end up in this place, the Rhode Island Department of Corrections. It's not a nice place. It's a prison. But inside the walls, something amazing happens. Every day, the inmates who are in the MAT program line up and they take their medicine. There are 3 opiate blockers that work: methadone, Suboxone, and Vivitrol. They are FDA approved. They get people off heroin. They save lives. Prisoners who enter the program choose which medicine they want to use. Michael Manfredi chose Vivitrol. He remembers when he first started taking it near the end of his last stint behind bars.
And one night I got a call, it was about 6:30. Come to the front desk. I said, oh no, hey, what do I do now? I know I didn't do nothing wrong, but they said, go see the nurse. I had tears in my eyes, because I knew it was time for me to get that pill.
Really, this is the perfect setting because there's not as much distraction, actually.
Linda Hurley is the president of a nonprofit called Kodak. It's been around for 50 years on the outside. The state of Rhode Island hired Kodak to distribute medicine inside the walls of the prison.
All 3 medications you carry on your life. It's no different than if you were utilizing lisinopril or something, I don't know, a blood pressure medication or insulin. You have a family, you have a job, you build your life. What it does is it stabilizes us physically so that we can do the emotional work that we need to do to heal from the disease.
I started messing around with the pills and everything, and then once I found opiates, that was the end of it, you know.
Ray Vincent has been behind bars for 3 years. He was stealing to support his habit for a while, then he upped the ante to robbery.
Maybe if I didn't come in here, I'd probably be dead.
So you think getting arrested was a good thing for you?
I think it saved my life.
Ray takes Suboxone. He knows he may take it for the rest of his life.
You sound optimistic, actually.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't want to continue to come here the rest of my life. You know, and if this medication is a stepping stone I need, I'll do it. That's the bottom line.
Inside the prison, inside the MAT program, the inmates have counselors. There are one-on-one meetings with recovery coaches and group meetings as well. They hit addiction with every tool they can throw at it.
And the recovery coaches come in and meet with anyone who's willing and interested in meeting with them so that they can develop a relationship with them on the inside and then have that relationship sustained on the outside.
Kevin Tangway says, I wasn't arrested, I was rescued.
And were you stealing to
Yeah, that's my main thing. What I do is I shoplift. I'm a shoplifter.
He's been in prison 8 of the last 10 years. He's on methadone.
We get it at 12 o'clock. And we're monitored. Like, we get dose evaluations, like the doctors, the counselors. We stay in touch so that they can know if where I'm at as far as the dose is holding me, keeping me, like, so that I'm not really feeling that bad.
The MAT system is a lifeline, and these men are holding on for dear life.
I'm not afraid of a lot of things, but I'm a little concerned about, like, I don't want to go back to it. I don't want to go back to it because you don't even know what's real anymore, and I'm a little afraid of that, to die alone, you know. I want to kind of try to put things together. My mother is still alive. I want to kind of like make some kind of amends before something happens to one of us, you know.
Look at this place. Look at all the buildings, the infrastructure. What if this was a specialized facility where we could use all of our resources and knowledge to fight this thing that is happening? What if it was a place where doctors and counselors and caseworkers were available, along with the treatment drugs that we know work, the ones we know save lives? What if this was a very specific place where sick people learn how to live life again? Job training, therapy, treatment, all of it in one place. It would have to be a place where the patients couldn't simply get up and leave if they wanted, because the sickness is such that that doesn't really work. But eventually they would leave and have jobs and families and maybe continue to use methadone, Suboxone, or Vivitrol for the rest of their lives, the way some people use insulin. What you're looking at is McNeil Island, completely abandoned for the most part. You might call it an answer, waiting for the right question. It wouldn't have to be here. It could be somewhere else. But maybe that $1 billion that we spent last year could be spent on a tough, compassionate concept that actually works, that saves lives. As Seattle and the rest of the West Coast wander in the darkness searching for answers, it's important to understand that the genius of what they're doing in Rhode Island isn't just that there is full drug treatment inside the prison walls. The genius is what happens when the inmates leave.
Priority number one being how are they going to continue the medication.
The minute someone shows up in a program in the community, they have to be registered in that database, so we know if they're showing up or not.
Are the numbers going up?
The figure that I saw yesterday was 93% of the people who leave here on MAT are following up in the community. That's amazing.
93%?
93% are following.
Michael Manfredi has a job now. He goes to meetings. He's reconnected with his family. He's productive. He's happy. He's alive.
My biggest thing is my granddaughter. She melts my heart, man. Absolutely, I've never been happier in my life.
What is that?
Because I've never lived a productive life like I am today. My life's great, man. I can't thank everybody enough, man, because if it wasn't for this MAT program, Michael wouldn't be here today. I'm proud of myself, proud of my family, and I'm proud of everything I've done.
And that means so much
And-
to all of us,
and
me and the people who work in the program, to do this work, because you're the reason we do it. Okay, panel discussion.
Yeah, I'd just like to, with Suboxone and methadone, if it's regulated at virtual, I don't know about the other one. I've never heard about that one, but I do know Suboxone and methadone. If it's regulated the way they're supposed, if they take it the way they're supposed to take it, and taper off of it, it shouldn't be for the rest of their life. It should be something that they can taper off of it, because I'm a pastor and I do a lot of funerals from Suboxone and methadone. People take it because they're addicts, you know what I mean? So they take a little bit, take a little bit, take a little bit more, take a little bit more, take a little bit more, and pretty soon they've passed away, they're dead because of Suboxone and methadone. I've done a lot of funerals because of that. So it's reality. I'm telling you the reality. If they take it the way they're supposed to, then it's a good thing, you know. But it is trading one drug to another is what I think it is. And but if it's taken the way it's supposed to, and they taper off of it and then eventually get off of it, methadone and Suboxone could be a good thing. But that's what my take is. I'm tired of doing funerals for methadone and Suboxone.
Christine?
Hi, yeah. I've never done heroin or meth or any of those pills. I've had one of my lifelong disabilities is kidney related. I just have the one kidney, so I've never been a drinker of alcohol. I'm a real food only type person. So I was shocked. What they talk about on there with a lot of those people and the homeless people being addicted to the drugs and alcohol is true. And that's one of the problems that I ran into is when I became homeless, is that one of the things is that they require you to go to meetings, and I'm like, what meetings are you talking about? Well, some alcohol meeting or drug meeting. I'm like, but I've never been an alcoholic. Why should I go to how not to drink alcohol meetings when I've never been an alcohol drinker? Why should I have to do these things?
Are you saying that somebody put a label around your neck?
Yes. Absolutely. And so there was nothing, there was no sort of thing for a person who becomes homeless for non-drug related or alcohol related things, because mine was the North-South Freeway, didn't have enough money to provide the relocation assistance they were required to do. And so, but most of the people that I see that through this, I've lived at the Father Bach-Haven for 6 years now, and most of the people I see there are alcoholics. Their biggest disability is drug related and alcohol related, and I'm a really like a rarity. There's only a couple people I've seen there that are not drug as their disability, okay? And so that's one of the reasons why I ended up going to city council, because we were required to go to meetings, and so I'm like, okay, yay, I finally found my meetings. I'm going to city council every week. So they do need to have those kinds of meetings where what that thing just talked about for people to get off drugs. But there needs to be other things too, and not label people as an alcoholic or drug user just because they're winded up homeless.
Right, I think Mr. Corker said, they can't all be placed in one barrel. They're different sections, they're different reasons for homelessness.
There is.
And you can't treat them one way.
And that's what they are doing, is treating people as one type, that they're all criminals, that they're all drug related, and they're not.
And it's not working, so.
Most of them are, that's true. And what he said is true too. I see a lot of these people that they get onto the methadone, they get up real early in the morning and catch their ride to go get the methadone and the stuff like that to get them off the heroin. But then they're still smoking the marijuana, they're still drinking the alcohol, and they're very happy to have their affordable housing and have the taxpayers pay for their rent, and they just sit around watching TV and drinking beer and smoking all day. And there's a lot of them that are very happy doing that. And that it makes me upset actually that's how it is, and it shouldn't be that way.
No, it shouldn't. Steve?
Well, one of the things is people need to talk to each other. An example of what we faced with the city of Spokane was a just cause ordinance that was being imposed by the tenants union out of Seattle. And it was interesting because of the dialogue the city set up. The Center for Justice came to the landlords and talked to us for hours about the impact it would have on housing. And they found an ordinance in Texas that had not only lessened the impact that the just cause ordinance had, but it created an environment where the landlords started working to be a part of the solution. Bakersfield was doing the same thing. And I'm watching Olympia today ignore studies, ignore facts, ignore research. Watching a Democratic legislature ignore a study from the University of Washington that basically pointed out things that were important in that legislation. They weren't talking to each other. And it's like every city feels like they have to go out and solve the problem by themselves.
Reinvent the
That
wheel.
comment about McNeil Island, I look at government facilities, institutions, buildings that are vacant, that would be available to develop programs like this. You don't have to build a $200 million jail to solve the problem. But those discussions, it's such a rush to judgment. In order to get elected to the next election, I've got to solve the problem overnight. And so what we do, we build shelters. We're spending how many millions building shelters that don't do a thing except put a roof over their head, and 2/3 of them don't want that roof if there are conditions. And it's kind of like children playing a very cruel game rather than, again, bringing the humanity back. And I just, why do we care? Why do we evolve? I remember when I was a child, my folks sent me to the church nearest their house. And that was 12 churches in the first 18 years of life. And the thing I remember the most was the parables. Love, taking care of your neighbor, having compassion, and remembering the humanity of life. I've forgotten the genuflexes and the different ways you're baptized. But bringing compassion that gets the people to sit around the table and to have talk. One of the reasons I admire Mike so much, he'll sit down and talk to anybody. He'll listen to any group, any idea to come up with solutions. And the resource of this country is so great. So what Toynbee's adversity theory, we have to get kicked in the butts before this country responds. Well, folks, we've been kicked in the butt, and we have the resources to respond. The potential is there, but it goes back to leadership on both sides.
Anyone else before we go to questions and answers?
Oh, you bet, you bet.
I
In fact, I just wanted to augment what Steve said. I mean, right here, the federal government currently spends more than $1 trillion a year on anti-poverty programs. Anti-poverty programs. Didn't say homelessness, and this is just the federal government, folks. Okay? That's a ton of money.
A lot of government jobs in there, though, aren't there?
Yeah, there sure is. That leads me to two things that I want to bring up, because this is in our face, and it is part of the discussion. But, as you folks have probably already heard, the Ninth Circuit Court has rejected the Boise decision on homelessness and sent it right back down to the city of Boise, which means there is a high possibility that the city of Spokane is going to get put on the legal hook to procure facilities or set up a facility for 24/7 emergency shelter. Okay? We have our eye currently on 2 facilities. One would be the South Cannon Street Warming Center, of which we are only using about 30 to 40% of the building's capacity, that carries a price tag of $400,000. The other facility is $1.2 million, and it would be the Spokane Housing Authority building that currently exists right there across the street from the bowling alley off of Mission and Division. $1.2 million. That's just to purchase the buildings.
Didn't I hear that even with the warming centers, many of the people did not want to use them? They didn't want to go to like Union Gospel and things that way, nor did they want to go to a supervised warming center.
Sure.
So,
and the reason for that, some of it is based on personal experience, but the other aspect of this is the social justice activists that have been advocating on behalf of the homeless down there. And I'm telling you what, some of the things that they are advocating for now, I mean, I just can't help but to get the feel that it all kind of boils down on attacking the symbol of capitalism, and that capitalism is morally defunct because, okay, and this is some of the stuff that they're talking about here to justify these policies of rent control and just cause and establishing public housing, minimum wage increase, income equality, and punitive business and corporate taxation. Going after the rich, things like this. They've got these compassion brigades out here that they've created that are the moral crusaders of any kind of homeless policy, okay? And again, as I've already stated, I mean, this is a group of activists that do believe in their hearts that compassion is the highest virtue. And we have to jump through a hoop and do everything that we can, throw all kinds of money at it, because it's the compassionate thing to do. I tend to hear a lot from the advocates, and they remind me. And believe it or not, folks, I opened my heart to Jesus Christ and became a Christian 6.5 years ago. So I've had some time under my belt as a person of that wouldn't be considered of faith, okay? But the one thing that they continue to pound in my head, and they only go halfway, Jesus commands us to love everybody. Well, yeah, he does. But at the same time, he says, you love the sinner, you condemn the sin.
Amen.
Go forth and sin no more, right? Yep. And you can take that, faith or non-faith, okay? Non-faith people, go forth and don't screw up no more. If you screw up some more, don't worry about it. Everybody makes mistakes. We're not perfect. But just know that there are organizations out there that are ready to help. The government is there to hopefully put itself in a position where we can help, and we can also be the symphony orchestrator. Okay? There's a lot of overlap out there. There's a lot of competition. And of course, there's this so-called homeless industrial complex that a lot of people are starting to talk about. I've seen some of that. I've experienced some of that. That's why I say that nonprofit that nonprofit sector is really competitive right now. And we got to figure out a way to get everybody working cooperatively, because we do
with
have
results.
There you go. We only have so many resources in this community to draw from, so we've got to start drawing from them a lot smarter than we have in the past.
Okay, we will go to our question and answer session. I like the little comment that's at the bottom of the slide there, but technically what we're not going to do, we are not going to bloviate. So we do have succinct questions, and if you have a question, come on up here and get behind the mic, and I think, is it on, John?
Not yet.
If it doesn't work, we'll use one of these.
You can just pass this to them.
Yeah, pass that around.
Yeah, we'll just pass it around. We're going to come up here because we have a video going. So come on up, and we'll use a microphone.
You're on film now.
Succinct.
My name is Gary. I'm going to ask if you're familiar with a study done by the Reagan administration and the Justice Department on the cause of recidivism in juvenile offenders. It's related to how they were taught to read, and it goes back to first grade. Any of you read that?
No, sir.
I read it in my wife's congressional testimony in 1999. And she also referred to the LA Times article referred to by the state of the state of Arizona, using illiteracy as a way of judging the construction of future prisons. I would like to bring you guys up individually to date on that. I'll take you out to lunch.
Thank you. Lunch is always good. Step right up. No, Gina, just stand. No, sir, you start, and she'll stand over there, so we don't take so much time.
Strabo Lucas. I want to know, now I think I have a little bit of experience in being homeless. I spent a year and a half out in boonies with being snowed on and rained on and everything else on. I've had the experiences of being shunned by people because I was homeless. I never ever once asked anybody for money. When they gave it to me, I gave it back. So that, what you said, Christine, absolutely true. I'm sick and tired of being treated. Everybody gets
Right up to your mouth.
Okay. I'm sick and tired of everybody being put under the same yoke. Now, how much money is actually being spent by Spokane in supposedly resolving the problems that we have with the so-called homelessness, when I see at least 4 different kinds of problems that end up in homelessness? How much money is spent there, and who's calling the shots at the game?
Well, the city of Spokane does get well over $10 million a year through the likes of HUD and several other programs. In addition to that, there are various grants that the city does go out for, and there is a little bit of state level funding that comes to support some of the affordable housing type programs and things like this. Okay, the workforce development, stuff like this. Couple that federal and state and grant funding with the fact that the city of Spokane is now truly allocating and budgeting at least 1% of the general fund. And because we were at like 1.8, 1.9 last year, this year we've surpassed 200 million, then we should be looking at least 2 million in human services funding on the city level that we've got also. Now understand, there's a great need. As a matter of fact, this document here represents the retreat that I just attended with the Community Housing and Human Services Board of the City of Spokane. The CHHS Board basically is kind of like the City of Spokane and STA as it pertains in the hierarchy with SRTC. There's a regional component that exists that is looking at transportation projects, that's going out and getting funding and things like this. Well, we have a continuum of care group that comes together from various industries, the service provider industry, government, the medical industry, things to that effect. And it's at that particular level that they're looking at, they get to 20,000 foot level, okay? They're deciding priorities based on data, statistics, best practices and stuff like this. And that information and those recommendations are then handed down through the channels. They'll hit Spokane Valley, they'll hit the county, they'll hit the city, and things to this effect. And based on those kinds of funding recommendations, et cetera, now the CHHS board, the mayor's administration, they're looking at those recommendations, they're dissecting and bisecting, and trying to come up with those programs based on that data and best practices that we can come up with. Priorities get established. The boards and commissions that the city has at its disposal will then go through established processes to evaluate, to score, and then to make recommendations on financial rewards or awards, grant awards at the city level. And those particular recommendations are sent out through the community. Community gets an opportunity to review and comment. Comment period is done. It hits the hopper, at which point it gets put on the city council agenda.
What scared me on that is he said established practices, and they haven't been working, so
Right.
maybe we need new.
Do they ever put the homeless people who have gotten out in charge of some of these, like they do with alcohol and drug abuse counseling?
No. No, I don't know any of that to be fact, but I do want to make a comment with regard to something that you said, sir. And I know that Mr. Corker and everybody else is going to agree. Part of that culture change and shift that I was talking about would involve, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand, I have an implicit bias. Okay, when I see a homeless person, I'm sorry, but I get a negative thought. That's just what, my experiences, what I've been exposed to, that was my initial reaction. My culture change and culture shift is one that would now recognize those homeless individuals where their individual problems as people, and you deal with them as people.
Portugal's doing it.
So Steve
I'd
has
like to
something to
approach
say
your
here.
question answer your question from a different perspective. I got so frustrated about 6 months ago. I wanted to know how much was being spent on homelessness. And I looked at the city of Spokane, came up with a figure somewhere between 12 and 16 million when you take community development and everything.
Sure.
I looked at the county, came up with about 9 million. I called up Deaconess Hospital, said, how much do you spend on non-reimbursed medical expenses related to homeless? By the time I got through with Lutheran, Catholic Charities, Deaconess, Sacred Heart, I was up to about 350 million. That's almost twice the size of the city of Spokane. Again, dollars being spent by the private sector and government to attack the symptoms.
Right? Right.
And I just sat there and said, why aren't we looking at it from a global perspective? Why aren't those institutions sitting around this city table coming up with community solutions? And why is it that the county says it's Spokane's problem? Because that problem leaches beyond Havana. And I'm not getting answers to those questions, but I tell you something, folks, there's an election this fall, and there's going to be a heck of an opportunity for you to ask those questions and hold the candidates accountable. And don't let them deal with this in 10-second sound bites. One of the nice things about this is we're almost in our second hour, and we've scratched the surface.
Oh, barely.
Scratched the surface. But that's my way of answering your question. We're at 300 million and counting.
Okay, let's have Gina ask her question now.
Should have grabbed that.
My name is Gina McKenzie. I'm a real estate broker many years here in Spokane. I've been involved heavily in education and also in law enforcement many years ago. My primary question is about law enforcement, because I worked for the State Patrol many years ago, and I can understand a little more of a police perspective, perhaps. My understanding is that some of the laws that are currently being worked on and being passed by whatever entity, whether it's the City of Seattle or the Washington State Legislature perhaps, or Spokane City Council, inhibit law enforcement doing their work, and then the officers get very, very, it's a losing proposition for them because they can't win, they can't operate in a lawful fashion to maintain law and order, which, homelessness does create a problem of law and order in the city when people are feeling threatened and so on and so forth. So my basic question is, what's happening with laws? Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We've been following laws that other cities and states are considering because of all the struggles we have in the city of Spokane. There's one jurisdiction in the country that is considering legislation that basically exempts the homeless from enforcement for a whole level of crimes. That they have to reach a certain level before the officer can enforce the laws. There are two bills before the legislature that are basically allowing criminal behavior not to be a grounds for eviction. And I'll give you one small example. A young man, 16 years old, was firing a BB gun out of his apartment, and it went across the street and struck somebody that was in a fitness facility. The fitness facility basically went after the individual and wanted to have that family basically evicted, and the landlord wanted to do it. The court came in and said, you can't do it. So now they're having to sue the landlord as well as the family for the conduct of a tenant. And there are laws that are basically saying that the grounds for evicting a tenant outside of heinous crimes, the only way you can do that is for non-payment. And now there are courts that are suggesting that a judge can give discretion up to 90 days for the person to get their life back together. And if they don't complete it in the 90 days, the landlord has to renew the eviction process. So there are things that are going on in some parts of the country. It can get worse.
I just want to comment on this because it just really, I'm going, wow. There was an article called Crimes of Survival. And what a theory is that the homeless, the poor, and people of color commit property crimes and low-level infractions in order to secure their basic survival. So any enforcement of laws is a violation of their basic human rights. It's sort of a concept that's going on. So, and I think Mike will tell you about something Kate Burke's bringing forth in 1808 that goes along these lines. But to give you an example, in California, Proposition 47 downgraded theft of property valued at less than $950 to a misdemeanor, meaning that the police are unlikely to pursue even habitual shoplifters and thieves. The predictable result is a statewide rise in petty theft. Seattle and King County recently released new guidelines calling on police officers to stop arresting individuals for all homelessness-related crimes, with the goal of eliminating racial disproportionality and ensuring that policies do not penalize homelessness and poverty. And you go to New York, and New York police departments backed off from arresting people for subway fare evasion on the grounds that enforcement has a desperate impact on the poor, and so fare beating in New York City has risen sharply since the new policy was taken in. So the idea that we can just close our eyes to the crimes because of the person, not because of the crime, the article ended, and I thought it was very good. Lady Justice may finally take her off her blindfold and play a new role as the arbitrator of two legal systems, depending on who stands before her. That's pretty sad where our country's going.
And folks, guess what? This is the latest fad in criminal justice activism. As a matter of fact, How about this? Newly elected district attorney Rachel Rollins, right on her campaign web, rollins4da.com, says that her office will not be prosecuting without special permission a few minor crimes listed below. Trespassing, shoplifting, larceny under 250, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, receiving stolen property, minor driving offenses, including operating with a suspended or revoked license, B&E, where it is into a vacant property, where it is for the purpose of sleeping or seeking refuge from the cold, and there is no actual damage to the property. Wanton malicious destruction of property, threats including domestic violence, minor possession of alcohol, drug possession with intent to distribute.
Does anyone know how much 3 grams of heroin is? How many shots that is? I think I heard on the video it was something like 30 administrations. So, and that's what they can carry around legally.
But we've done the same thing in our homes. That depends on intolerance level for people. Some people can just take a little bit, some people can take a lot.
And I go back to attacking the symptom of the cause. I remember when I got a hack at school, the first question my father asked me was not what for, how many hacks you gave, and he gave me twice as many. Yeah. And accountability again. Yes. And he never excused my behavior. He never increased my ability to be less observant or something else like that. He set rules and enforced them. And he was very loving.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Kindest
Been
man
there,
I've
done
ever
that, and I'll tell you something, it all went to hell when Barney the Purple Dinosaur came on the scene.
I like to say, I was homeless. I lived in my car for 2 years, and people didn't see me as homeless because I didn't stay at shelters. I didn't beg for money. I was being self-reliant. I was being responsible for myself. There's a lot of people that go camping and go to the lake and like to be outdoors when they have a house to live in. But about the crime, I didn't commit any crimes. I lived in my car for 2 years and did not commit any crimes. When I parked my car somewhere, I would pick up the litter everywhere around me because I didn't want to be blamed for the litter just because I was in my car. And people do call the police on you when you're homeless if you're in your car because they label you.
Would you go out and teach these people this?
You're
a great example.
Label him.
I tried it, but my point too is that when you have somebody that's doing the things that he just read on the list, that they're going to not prosecute people for doing those kinds of crimes. Okay, when you're homeless, you don't have to do those crimes. I didn't do those crimes. And so the people that are doing those kinds of crimes would be doing those things whether they lived in a house or not lived in a house. And one of the reasons that people that do those things on that list end up homeless is because they're irresponsible doing those things. That's because I didn't get homeless by being a criminal. I didn't commit any of those crimes or any crimes when I was homeless, and so they're totally separate issues.
Right.
They're totally being a criminal or being homeless does not need to be the same thing.
Did you have something to add, Danny?
Nope.
No. Steve? No. Okay, we have another question here. Microphone, please.
Thank you very much. My name is John Christina. First of all, thanks to Northwest Grassroots, to John and Cecily for putting this on.
And Mr. Fagan.
And also thank you to Mike, Christine, Danny, and Steve. This has been so enlightening for me. I've really, really learned an awful lot from today, and I hope that the community as a whole can work together to solve this problem. I first saw this video, Seattle is Dying, about 2 weeks ago, and the things that stood out to me was, number one, I didn't really have a grasp on what homelessness was all about. But I realized that it also involved people who were using drugs and people who were mentally ill, and we need to get those problems solved. And I think it's something that has to be done not only with government but also in the private sector. Something we all have to work together. We need to get together. We need to put aside all the political partisanship and work together to try to resolve the problem. But a couple of things.
Question?
Yes, a couple of things. Thank you. I hate bloviating, but here I go.
Thanks, Mom.
The question is, when I saw the movie, or I saw the video, there were two things that stood out to me. Number one is that when they showed that most of the crime was committed by about 100, the top 100 people, if they could eliminate that problem, they would eliminate a lot of the problems on the streets. And the second one was that, oh golly, I forgot what I was going to say. I hate when that happens. I'll think of it in a minute, but anyway, perhaps you can address that, and I'll be able to come back and take the other one.
Well, I'll tell you something, John. I can tell you that when the city approaches certain things, we definitely look at it in that 80-20 vision. You're right, because our prolific auto thieves commit 80%. Okay, so 20% of the criminals committing 80% of the crimes. Okay, this is how the strategy that we used when we decided to cite our CSO stormwater tanks. Okay, and what I mean specifically by that is, where is the highest accumulation of stormwater? Where does it accumulate in Spokane? That's where we targeted putting our tanks. Okay, and anyway, 80-20 rule, we are definitely looking at things like that, but understand, and I know that there's people in this room that could affirm this. There are things about the criminal justice system with regard to sentencing, deals that may be discussed amongst the judiciary, the prosecutor, and the defense attorney, that we're not fully aware of. You know, there's a point system that exists, for instance, when it comes to a judge deciding whether or not they're going to hand down a jail sentence or something different, or the length of a jail sentence. I mean, there's a scoring thing that exists. There's a whole lot of things that the public is not aware of in that criminal justice system, as far as, you know, if this, you know, the cause and effect, really. And, you know, that is another thing that I think is extremely important, is we need to all have the same understanding of what is available, so that, again, we can all sit around the table and expand on each other's ideas. You know what I'm saying?
I just remember the second part I was going to ask about. I apologize, I'm getting old. But the second part had to do with the Rhode Island solution. It seemed like with a 93% success rate, that is something that should be jumped on by local government and the nonprofits in the community to do that. And so I really see that as a positive example. 93% is just incredible. And so I wanted to get your thoughts about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Kate say?
Treatment is always good. I mean, treatment is, if they go in there and want to change their life, I mean, that's treatment is great. And I mean, I'm a recovering alcoholic drug addict. I mean, I have 3 treatment centers I went into, and you know, and my life was going downhill. And my brother was killed because of addiction. My wife divorced me. We got remarried after 3 years. Got to say that. Lost my job, DWI, and I sat in jail. And that's not the way I wanted to live my life. You know, it has to be a decision of the people that go into the treatment centers, that they want to change their life. If they get forced to go into a treatment center, then they're, you know, and they don't want to change their life, they're just going to go through the treatment and come back out and do the same thing that they're doing before. But it's about, you know, sometimes we try to help these people that don't want help, and that's a lot of the problem. And I believe, you know, that sometimes they have to hit rock bottom, and you think that they were hitting rock bottom, but some of them don't. They just continue to hit rock bottom after rock bottom, and they don't want to change. I believe these people, you know, like the Rhode Island, the people that want to change their life. That's you know, these treatment centers that we have around here are people going in there that want to change their life, and there are also people in there that don't want to change their life. They're court ordered to go in there, and they go right back out doing the same thing. Yeah. So I want to, you know, I mean, we gotta have an opportunity for them to go into a Rhode Island place if they want to change their life, and give them that opportunity to change. I did. It took me 3 treatment centers, but I changed my life. You know what I mean? Now I'm a pastor at a recovery church. You know what I mean? And to me, that's what God can do through somebody who's sick and tired of being sick and tired. Amen. And so that's what I say. They gotta want it.
Steve?
Another thing is a role that individuals can play. Another topic, dropouts. We interviewed, when I was on the city council, 100 dropouts that had turned their lives around. Every one of them said it was a mentor that made the difference. Yeah. Somebody thought they were important enough to care and interceded, made a difference in the life. And somehow that relates to the homeless issue of people being able to reach out. Mike took a homeless family into the home. I'm not sure how it's working out, but those are the type of things we can't ignore. And I'll never forget what those students, one after one, said it wasn't programs, it wasn't threats, it wasn't being told you're going to be a drug addict and end up in prison. It was somebody who reached out and cared about them. And in most cases, it wasn't a parent.
That's right. Yeah, and talking what Danny was saying, I think we've all learned in life from quitting smoking to quitting drugs or alcohol, unless the person wants to change, it doesn't matter how many programs they go into. They've got to have the desire.
You betcha.
Gretchen. Okay.
Well, come on up, man. Ma'am, come on up. Have a seat in the next one in the line chair.
Yeah, that's our
I have kind of
cue.
3-part questions, actually 3, but first of all, just a yes or no, is loitering and littering, are those still against the law in the city of Spokane?
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My next one is for Mike to answer a little bit after I ask Steve something, but would you please explain to people what Kate Burke's Spokane Promise Ordinance would do if it passed? It hasn't gotten to even a hearing yet, but we need to know that this is what she is proposing. My question to Steve is, you said that you had a landlord meeting with city officials and they listened, okay? So did they change their minds? Did they do something constructive? And if the city council, who are the city council members that seem more like Mike in this area? That some I think are very, very progressive and enabling, and there hopefully are some that really do realize that the homeless have some responsibilities, and they're the ones that maybe we can influence to help with this situation.
In regards to listing in City Hall, came up after the Property Maintenance Code in Title 18 was a proposed Bill of Rights for tenants. And I think it had 14 component parts, kind of an omnibus bill, all one big swap. And after the town hall meetings, they realized that they had to approach these subjects one at a time. And that consensus was basically shared by all the council members except for Kate Burke, and to a lesser extent, Brian Biggs. Mike was instrumental in communicating to us necessary information. The reach out from Karen Stratton and Lori Kinnear was significant in moving the council from a 5-2 or 6-1 support base to a 4-3 against that strong legislation. And that's the power of not giving up, talking, educating, providing data. Ron Davenport here works with us in doing legislative background study and research on what other cities. And the role he played in educating council and sharing that data was instrumental in slowing the train down. They may be waiting till this fall's election, I'm not sure, but they listened far more intently than the legislature did. I share that with you.
That's encouraging.
For sure.
Next
All right,
question?
Well,
or do you
was-
have something?
Yeah, there was another thing going on here. First and foremost, I hope everybody would be happy to hear that Mayor Condon went ahead and vetoed the Open City Hall ordinance.
Hey.
I'm hoping it's not just symbolic. I'm hoping that my colleagues are going to hear the mayor loud and clear on this and maybe not challenge the veto. We'll see what happens. But recently, and on Monday morning, my seatmate, Councilmember Kate Burke, did introduce to the rest of the council and the public a homeless Bill of Rights. Again, easiest way to describe it would be the latest fad in criminal justice activism known as survival crime. Okay? She wants to make it okay in the city of Spokane that anybody can sleep in our parks, sleep in our public places, things to this effect. Wow.
Is that online someplace? I can send it to you.
I don't know if it is online yet. Now,
It's in the agenda for the Public Safety Committee meeting.
yeah, there you go.
On Monday, April 8th.
All right, that would be SpokaneCity.org. You can click on council documents and then look for the public safety meeting from 10:30 last Monday, the 8th. And buried in that agenda, you will find a copy of that ordinance known as the Spokane Promise Ordinance. Okay?
And then that was a whole new section she wanted to add to 1808, was that
Yes.
right? So it would be
Yes.
18.08.010.
You betcha.
I've been told that 3 council members are opposed to that, possibly a 4th. And what's significant now is that Mayor Condon would probably veto most of these issues. And you only need 3 votes to basically prevent an override of the mayor's veto. I say that it's encouraging, but when that comes forward, you need to testify, you need to email those council members to keep the pressure on. I can't tell you, when I was on the city council, what 30 individually written emails or phone call messages, the impact that I had on our decision making. I can't tell you what having 500 people show up at a town hall, the impact that it had on the city council. When these things come up, get involved. A simple 2-sentence, 3-sentence email can make all the difference.
Thank you.
When we see form letters come in from fuse.org and all those other guys, I mean, that's what it is. It's a form letter. You get to see the same email 100 times. Steve's right. If it's an individual email, 1 sentence, 1 paragraph, a book, I don't care. That is effective. There's a lot of truth in what you have heard, the old adage, and it goes, politics goes to those who show up.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about it.
Next question?
May I ask 3 short ones?
Sure. Succinct and short is great.
First of all, was my understanding that Rhode Island situation, they were somewhat incarcerated there.
Yes.
Yes.
So what could we do so that we could implement something like that in our city? That was the first question.
Okay.
Second question, I know that in this room, there are 2 people, in just this room alone, and there's, I'm sure more, who, have been in situations like this and have come out of them. And they are people who have the knowledge, the understanding to be able to be mentors. And what could be done to have a cadre of people like that to start, helping develop these programs and make decisions in terms of these programs. Okay. And I'm trying to think of the third one, and I can't remember it.
You're not alone, John.
So there's a Bill of Tenants' Rights. Where is there a Bill of Owners' Rights? I have a friend who was renting out one of her rooms, and it was a nightmare. And I have a condo, and part of the reason I don't want to rent it is because I don't want to end up in that nightmare. So why can't we have a tenant, the owner's Bill of Rights? And I appreciate that you're on that committee, and I appreciate everything you guys have said.
Thank you.
The last question first. There's a Washington State Landlord-Tenant Act that protects the rights of both landlords and tenants. What's getting hacked up is they're beginning to take that balance and weight it toward the tenants. And I've heard attorney, don't mess with the law. There are plenty of protections for tenants if they're exercised. The opponents basically say, well, they're afraid because they'll be evicted. They cannot be evicted for that action, just because they get politically involved or something of that nature, and they have plenty of legal resources available to make that happen. The second question was about involving...
Wait, excuse me, I think you misunderstood. I'm talking about the owners'
Right.
rights.
I'm saying the protections for landlords.
Okay.
And they're trying to undermine those in current state law right now. And that's what's scaring us. We've operated under the Tenants Act for, yeah.
It's called the landlord, it's called the
Landlord's
Landlord-Tenant Act.
Act.
It's a Washington
And
state
it's
law.
well thought out and protection. The involvement issue of getting people who have come out of homelessness or situations being a part of the solutions, that's what study groups are. One of the things the city did was 3 housing studies, one on rental issues, one on affordable housing, and then one on definitions and standards. They weren't perfect, but they were intensive. They had participation, not always balanced, from every party. And in 2 of the 3 cases, they had professional facilitation. Those are the type of things that will encourage people like you're talking about of getting involved. It's less intimidating than going down in front of City Hall or appearing before a council.
You betcha. Let me go ahead and address a couple of your questions. First and foremost, anybody that is interested in applying for the Community Housing and Human Services Board, we have 4 openings currently. SpokaneCity.org. Find your volunteer applications, get it filled out, email it or mail it to the mayor's office. He will take a look at the application and forward it on to the CHHS board. They will probably bring you in, give you a phone call, talk to you a little bit, and then make the recommendation to send you through to the council. 4 open positions, guys.
Any pizza?
You have to be a city resident?
Yes.
For that particular board, I do believe that there's a residency requirement.
Thank you.
Oh, no, wait a minute. There is not. Why? It's because that board is regional thinking. Okay, so we've got representation.
Are you talking about the regional or the city's human rights?
No, not human rights. The Community Housing and Human Services Board.
That's
okay?
regional. That's regional.
Yes, that is regional. So you don't have to be a city resident for that. Pardon?
What was the website again?
SpokaneCity.org. Okay. Couple of other things. Number 1, April, Spokane Gives Month. This is the month where the city takes suggestions, recommendations, labor, okay? And we put people on a list, we put them on a web page, we highlight what they're volunteering for, what their background is, kinda. You know, I wanna volunteer for urban forestry. So you gotta have an arborist background, right? So if there are people in the community that would like to volunteer at a social service agency, volunteer at the city, to be part of a study group, a think tank, whatever the case, log on to SpokaneCity.org, click on Spokane Gives, and leave some contact information there. That would be one way, okay, to get involved that way. What could the city be doing a little bit better with outside agencies like the states and the feds? Well, even though we are still capable of doing a 72-hour hold on someone we know is having mental illness, that's the extent. 72-hour hold, they get evaluated, more likely they're out on the street again. What we need to be doing is we need to get on board with positive reforms, emergency involuntary commitments. We need to be lobbying for more psychiatric beds in our local communities. Okay? I'm not just saying one huge facility in Spokane and the whole county gets to use. 25 beds here, 15 beds over there, depending upon the size of the community and what it is that the community can prioritize for funding to address the issue. Because frankly, having just a warming center, to me, that's one thing. Having a 24/7 shelter is great, but now that we know we're dealing with mental health, we're dealing with addiction issues, and for those of you that are keen on dental health, everybody knows overall dental health is a picture and an overview of everything else, right? We have limited dental, limited medical, we have some emergency addiction counseling, mental health counseling, at least at these kinds of centers, so that we can get a better handle on what the condition and the state is of that particular individual human being, okay? Involuntary emergency commitment. Would society be good with ID cards for those that are chronically homeless? We're already tracking people to an extent on our HMIS system, okay? But should we go even further and maybe issue some kind of an identification card and pass some of that humanity and that human dignity on?
Not good with that.
Google probably has it all ready for you.
Jim, I believe Jim has a question.
I don't know.
This,
These are thinking outside the box that we haven't tried yet.
If they're gonna be using services, the card would be helpful and justifiable, so they can get through these services instead of having to answer the same questions over and over and over. They have the little card.
We as a city require our contractors to utilize HMIS to do what? To count heads. That's what we're doing, we're counting heads. What color you are, what orientation you are, that's what we do. That's all we do.
Two questions.
Yes, sir.
First, I want to put Mike on the spot. Mike, I appreciate what you have to put up with at city council meetings and the like. My experience has been that the usual suspects and the noisiest ones continue to show up. Now you're asking, and you've talked about getting the community and the business community to make input. 2 months ago, at the request of the Downtown Spokane Partnership, Mark Richards and GSI, I was one of I testified on the sit and lie ordinance. And my testimony was met with at least a dozen people who stood up and turned their back on me. One individual who gave me the finger as I walked back to my seat, and a couple city council members who rolled their eyes. Now I have to ask you, is that a welcoming venue for people, like business people, who want to come in and make some input? How are you going to discipline? It was like kindergarten. So what can be done? I wrote the council president afterwards, and I'm still waiting 2 months later for an answer to my question about misbehavior. So what can we do?
All right. I can tell you that I sit a lot of times on that dais and I am cringing from what I hear, from what I see.
This has been going on for years.
It has been going on for years, and it all boils down to, in my heart of hearts, it all boils down to the decorum that is required to conduct serious business. We are at in a meeting that commands respect, in my opinion. There is a certain decorum that needs to be followed. But just know, on the flip side of that, those individuals that we are having to deal with are the antisocial. They have been so empowered that they don't care.
That's right. Mike, we go there.
The rules.
We go there, and the councilmen are carrying on side conversations with one another while people have taken their time to be down there to testify.
Yes. Now, God help me, I don't want to make a political statement because we are not here to campaign, period, all right? I had to remind a neighborhood council chair of that last night. If I was the king of the world, all right, yes, I would definitely demand a certain amount of decorum so that we can get business done and done efficiently on behalf of the majority of the citizens that we are serving. Now, when I say the majority, what we're dealing with is a component that's about 100 people or less versus 220,000.
That's correct.
Okay? Let me tell you what I've been hearing over the last 7 years. When is it going to be my turn? What about the other 220,000? We basically turned our cheek on those folks. Okay? That's how I feel.
If that happened in the Washington State Legislature or in Congress, the person would be escorted out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yes, they
it's-
would. Yes,
it's
they
the
would.
responsibility of the chair. I've lived in this city when I've seen behavior like that that was not tolerated.
Well,
You get what you elect.
And that was my point. Second thing, and I'll shorten it up. And I base this on my short tenure as your civilian police chief. Do the folks in the homeless business and the city council understand that there is a percentage, and I'd say 5 to 10% of the people, and I learned this from ride-alongs with my officers, 5 to 10% of the people that are homeless that do not want a roof over their head. And I've heard it over and over again. I won't go to a place where I have to live under somebody's rules. I won't go somewhere where I can't do drugs. I won't go somewhere where I can't drink. I won't go somewhere where I can't bring my 2 or 3 dogs.
Smoking.
Right, and I went over with the previous homeless coordinator round and round who swore up and down, I won't rest until, he said he wouldn't rest until he had a roof over everybody's head, and I said, it ain't gonna happen. Is that, I mean, are they aware of that, Mike?
My heart of hearts tells me, yeah, they are. And my colleagues, some of my colleagues, are making these decisions not based on the best interests of the people that put them in office. Period. They're making these decisions for their special interests and things to that effect. I mean, the truth be told, okay? Sir, reflecting back on, maintaining control of meetings, we do have a series of council rules. They are basically enshrined in ordinance, and in order to change that, it would take a majority of the council to do so. So, again, if I was the king of the world, I would definitely be making a big case for a lot of respect at these meetings, and order and control, and rules would be suggested as such and put out there for deliberation and vote. One thing that I learned real quick, being a council member, and especially being in the severe minority, is there's no I in team here, guys. It takes a minimum of 4 of us to make anything happen. Okay? Not making any excuses, but I'm sure that you can well imagine, not only do I have to fight external things, but I also have to deal with fighting internal things too, in order to get stuff done. So, you are absolutely right, although I feel that number is a bit higher, sir. Higher than the 10 to 15%. The antisocial, the give it to me, but don't put any conditions on it. Okay? And that's why I say, right now the narrative out there and the battle cry from the folks that are engaged in this thing, it's really sad that there isn't a whole lot of that 220,000 other people that we got in the city of Spokane that haven't become vocal. I'm serious. All we are hearing from is the antisocial, special interest, social justice stuff. And
paper that's behind it.
We have another question here.
Yeah, okay.
My name's Matt, and I wish that Phil were here tonight or today because I heard from Phil just recently that he's questioning why he hasn't been brought to the table to be part of that solution. And I guess the question I have then is, because this homeless situation has been going on for quite a bit of time, what is leadership doing in Spokane there's two parts to the question. What is leadership doing in Spokane to include faith-based organizations as part of the solution? And number two then is, I like the idea of McNeil Island. And if McNeil Island is part of the solution, or potential solution based on what we've seen in other parts of the country, what is leadership doing in Spokane, doing to set the stage so that we can start shifting the homeless people out to McNeil Island and let them get the help that they need. In my mind, that's compassion, but that's also accountability.
Thank you, Matt.
Let me repeat that we are not engaged at the city level in any of our city priorities, legislative priorities, with regard to lobbying the state or the federal government on positive reforms like emergency and voluntary commitment that you just referred to, because that's the type of a situation that would exist at McNeil Island. Folks would be involuntarily committed because they'd be deemed as a threat to themselves as well as the general public. I don't know how many times I've encountered individuals here downtown, other parts of town, where they're standing there having a conversation with 5 other people who aren't there. Somebody like that, to me, is kind of like, that hay catching on fire. I mean, it could go whoosh. And you just never know from minute to minute if somebody is going to go off or not. And, I for one have a concern about public safety that way, for sure.
Well, I don't think it was compassion to
and that's another thing.
Totally close down all of the places
Yeah.
that treated the mentally ill.
Yeah.
Because there are many mentally ill that are not capable of taking care of themselves. They need assistance.
But let's not forget, the highest virtue in the world is compassion. Okay?
But it's the definition of compassion.
There you go. There you go.
Let me just build off the numbers that were expressed earlier, which is there's over $300 million that are currently being supportive of the homeless situation in our area. And if you look at that $300 million, a majority of that is coming from the faith-based organizations. Yet the faith-based organizations are being blocked out.
It was also a business.
We need to have the speakers go up there.
Right, Gary?
Yeah, my name is Gary, and I have been in Spokane approximately 10 years now. I do understand the homelessness. I understand the drugs. I understand the alcohol, and I understand the prison situation, because I've been in every single one of them. And what they need most of all is mentors. That's not just the city council. It's all of us. So my question would be, is there any program set up that you don't have to go through 80,000 different steps to obtain a job? Most people who have a label, and she mentioned labels earlier, but most people who are in the street are mentally, emotionally, sexually, physically abused. That's why they're out on the street. They're scared. They don't want to interact with people who have stuff, and those who have stuff don't want to interact with them. I interact with everybody from the one laying on the street in a doorway up to multimillionaires in this town. And I've learned a lot, and I've listened a lot, and I understand a lot. And what we need is more mentors. We need a program set up in Spokane where individuals who want a job, who need a job, minus that 10-20% that you spoke of earlier, that who don't care, don't want to get involved, don't understand it, can go apply for a job and have employers who are willing to hire some of these people, because if you can keep one person out of prison, you save $34,000 a year. And when you talk about people, recidivism for 1 or 2 people, 100 people that they spoke of earlier, that's $34,000 a year, and it's probably 36 by now.
And Jim, is Jim still here? Take my glasses off. Isn't our annual figure up around 50 grand?
Per person?
Yeah. 50 grand.
When you throw, because they're responsible for medical medical and dental as
Yep.
well, so we can throw all that in.
They get
Probably
30
depending on the inmate,
amazing?
probably 35.
I had to go to jail for a few
Well,
years.
it's mentorship. It's about mentorship, and we all got to do our part. I mean, we can't just talk about it. I mean, what we're doing. We have housing. We got 67 people, 60 to 70 people. In the houses, and trying to mentor them. We're mentoring them to follow a new path that they can have. For us, we're faith-based. It's about following the path that Jesus Christ has for them. And we have a great success rate that's going on. It's for us mentoring. So we, each and every one of our individual lives, we need to be going out and, mentoring. We've got a niche in what we're doing from the treatment centers, from the jails. I get calls from the courts. I get calls from the police department, for helping, because it's making a difference. It's called ROAR, ROAR, reaching out, advocating recovery, and we're mentoring and helping them become productive parts of society. And it's not, we can talk about it, but maybe we're the ones that need to step up to do it, to be the mentors. We're doing our part. Sheriff Ozzie loves what we're doing. He does. He told the city council, he told the county commissioners, you guys, all we do is talk about it. He said, we're doing it. Family Faith Community Church, we're doing it. We're following the path and doing what God wants us to do, and to help and mentor, people coming out of treatment and out of jails and do that. But it's our, that's our little niche that we're doing. What can we do? What can you do? What can you do to mentor somebody? Because these guys would be back out homeless and in drug addiction.
Okay, I think we have one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up and let all of you make a final comment. And we've all been here a good long time, and I really appreciate you being here and your questions.
Hi, I just have one constant.
This is Dalton.
Dalton Van Houten, retired Navy, retired school teacher.
Thank you.
Boy, was that an eye-opener when I taught high school for 16 years.
Oh, man.
Kids actually...
Dalton,
well, he didn't
put the
actually know
mic up
anything.
closer, Dalton.
Mike.
Okay,
Yeah,
my question is, what is the starting salary for a police officer in Spokane or a sheriff? What do they get an annual salary?
Just the base salary is the upper 60,000.
And we're paying how much to have somebody in jail?
I think it's like 68 grand a year, just the salary.
Okay, and it's costing 70,000 to incarcerate somebody?
50.
No, it's about almost 50. It's $130 a day.
Okay, that's about 125 too much. There are a whole lot of McNeil Island properties in the United States that are just melting away. Government's paying big bucks to have them sit there to do nothing. Now, first-time offender, yeah, give them a break. That sucker comes back again, that's wasted money. These police officers, these sheriffs, they deserve twice what they're getting for what they're doing. I just heard it on news yesterday. Chicago police officer starting salary $40,000 a year.
Oh my
Who in the hell would work in Chicago for $40,000 a year with that kind of population? It's insane.
What you are saying, sir, it goes right into the category of this cultural change and cultural shift.
Well, we're
Okay.
35 years behind the power curve of doing something about this.
Absolutely.
When I was a kid, my distinguished gentleman here in his blue shirt, when we were kids, it was tough love. My parents loved me to death. It was tough love. I didn't cross the line.
That's right.
Then we got into, well, if it feels good, do it. And then we got into it, well, everybody should have a trophy. Well, they get out of school and they don't get a trophy. And that's the start of this degrading society that we've got. We're 35 years behind the power curve, and it's not going to change overnight.
I think one of the things that we're looking at as far as remedial math and remedial other subjects for our high school graduates going to college have to basically have remedial math, remedial this, remedial whatever, because they may be high school graduates, but they didn't learn a damn thing.
In fact, one last little statement. I love numbers, okay? I joined the Navy in 1963. Came out in 1996. Couldn't find the door, okay? I've got a seaman out there working for me 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, on an aircraft carrier, 5,600 people. Their living compartment is as big as this room, but there's 85 people in it. They've got 4 urinals, 6 showers, and 6 toilets. and they're all good friends, okay? You look at some of these jails, I used to do a little ministering out at the correctional site there. My sailors would have loved to have had that kind of room. And they weren't doing anything wrong except they were defending the United States of America. We got it all ass backwards on how we do business. And come election time, it's our opportunity to change that. Unfortunately, not enough people want to change it.
And not enough good people will run for office.
Yeah, and it's not just Democrats or Republicans or independents. They're all in the swamp together.
Okay, we were done with questions and answers, so this is your time, guys, to finish this up. Thank you so much for being here.
I want to thank you for giving the most precious thing you have that you'll never get back. 3 hours of your time, listening and caring about the issue. And we usually don't have this type of opportunity to say what we feel. It's nice to be able to comment on issues rather than a 10-second soundbite. But I appreciate your interest. I appreciate the fact that you've been willing to sit here and talk about an important issue in this community for 3 hours. So thank you.
I just want to thank, I'm honored to be part of this, and I thank you, Mike, for just asking me to be here. I'm just grateful. We do have a problem. There is a problem out there, and we need to, we need to address it. City council, and our individual lives, and where we're doing, what we're doing, and how we're living. There is a problem, but it doesn't take just a city council or anybody. It takes all of us to come together to, like Steve was saying, we got to communicate together. We all got to communicate, and so I believe that we all, City of Spokane is a special place, that I love, that we need to communicate to help whatever we can to make this the most amazing city it is. Amen. Thanks.
Hi, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, being on this panel, so I want to thank Mr. Mike Fagan for inviting me. You guys were talking a question back about mentoring, how important it is to mentor, and I think that what you're mentoring a person is important. It's an important part of it. Like, what are we going to mentor them for? And so you can mentor somebody and you can get them to straighten up off the drugs they're on and to get them to change their life around, but you can't make somebody hire them. And a person who owns a business and creates a job, they're because of these minimum wage laws and all the laws about hiring somebody, you have to give them dental and medical and all these rules that the government puts on a business owner to hire somebody. They're paying a lot of money. They want to hire the best person that they can get for as much as they have to pay. And I think that that's a big part of the problem, where a business owner should be able to hire for somebody for less than minimum wage if a person wants to work for less than minimum wage. I don't believe in abuse. People shouldn't be abused, but it's just like an auction. People want to sell something for the most money that they can sell it for. Well, a person who's willing to work for less money than somebody else or work harder than somebody else to get that job, and that's not what's happening. The whole thing is back into the basic education where people are not being mentored to be self-reliant. They're being taught in the public schools that a job with a whole bunch of money is going to be waiting for you, and that's not happening. And so they're giving up hope, they're turning to crime, they're turning to drugs. And so I think a lot of it is just a basic politics where, capitalism versus socialism. And so I think a lot of it is education, and that we need to start teaching them younger to be self-reliant.
Well, what you're saying is we've tied employers' hands as to who they can employ. They can't take a shot at something because it might lose, that kind of thing. I employed many, many, many people in my career, and I've got to tell you, I was criticized sometimes of why did you hire that person because they have this, and that. But I just had a feeling that, and they, so often they turned out to be great. But I don't think employers have that shot anymore.
No, and the previous presidential administration put out a lot of credits to hire somebody who's disabled. But the thing is they would hire somebody who's visually
Visually, yeah.
disabled. If they're missing an arm or missing a leg, then they, or in a wheelchair. We have one wheelchair cubicle, so we need to hire somebody in a wheelchair to fill that cubicle, and you will get, tax credits from the federal government for hiring them. But there's a lot of people with disabilities that you can't see.
Sure.
It might be kidney, it might be autism or something, and those people are the ones left behind where you can't see by looking at them that they have a disability.
Right.
And so, but a lot of it is that they're tying a person's hands to creating a business. People should be able to work for themselves, people should be able to create businesses without all these rules attached, and they should be able to hire somebody for less than minimum wage if that person wants to.
And let that person prove over a period of time that they are
Yes.
worth,
Yes.
the job.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think that's an important
Yeah.
part. So what are we mentoring them for? You can't mentor people down a path that doesn't exist at the end of that path. I think that is important. Again, thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for being here.
All right.
Wrap it up, Mike.
I'm going to try to make this short, sweet, right to the point. Here's the short of it, folks. Elections have consequences.
Amen.
What we talked about today, I'd have to say, didn't even scratch the surface of what is at the root of all of this. Like I said it during the onset of this meeting, it is so convoluted and so complicated. There's so many variables that come into play. It all boils down to our humanity, though, if you sit and think about it. All about our humanity, okay? We haven't been able to make those strides because of the leaders we ended up electing. They haven't chosen to lead up to this point. They've chosen to engage in the status quo. And by all appearances, participate in growing that industrial complex that we continually hear more and more about every day.
Yeah, we're always told to follow the money.
That, exactly, follow the money. It's sad that government has to take the view and the stance with faith-based organizations when it's the faith-based organizations, the first people the government goes to when the stuff hits the fan. Okay? I can tell you, all of the faith-based organizations that I have occasion to know versus non-faith-based organizations, faith-based organizations got a tremendous batting average for success. They do. Okay? Union gospel. If you guys only knew what kind of a lashing Union gospel and Mr. Phil Altmaier has taken in the last week, it is ugly. For a group of people who march and vandalize and all that stuff in the name of tolerance and love and all this other good stuff, it just blows me away that there's such hypocrisy out here.
Right in City Hall.
Exactly. Just look at the state legislature right now. They know poverty and homelessness is on the rise, but what are they doing right now? Creating more fees, creating more taxes, creating more regulation, thereby creating more poverty and creating more homelessness. Again, elections have consequences, folks. You've got to get the leaders in office that have the political courage and the heart to move things forward differently than where we've gone, where we've been, because it ain't working, guys. It's not working. Not working. It's getting worse. Okay? In the last year, every time somebody screams, what are we doing? We're throwing money at it. That's all we've been doing. We got to do it different. That's the bottom line. So, again, folks, very important election coming up in November. It is a reality. You got to interject the politics in this, because at the end of the day, it's going to take political courage from those that you elect in order to make the changes to the policies that drive this, so that we can change what kind of results that we've been seeing. and start getting the results that everybody out here in this audience deserve to get. That shows you that we, your elected representatives, are doing the job that you elected us for, and we are providing you with results that you expect.
Well, we need to be thinking outside the box. Can't keep doing what we've been doing. So thank you all for being
Yes.
here. You gave us a tremendous amount of your time. I know you have some important things to do on Friday afternoon. And you guys too. Church service, get going. And so anyway, thanks so much for coming. I know it's been uncomfortably warm in here, other things, and you've just been great. So thank you all.